Hello, I'm Rajiv Chandran. In today's session, I'm going to discuss about the project that I have chosen for implementation for this course. Let's discuss this further. The objective of this project is to design and implement a REST API backend application using AWS Lambda, AWS DynamoDB, and AWS S3. I would be using Python as my programming language and Boto 3 as the SDK. I would implement 4 AWS Lambda functions, 3 for DynamoDB and 1 for S3. Further, each of these Lambda applications would be exposed via the AWS API gateway, and then developers could be able to utilize these API gateway URLs to further develop a web application or a mobile application. Now that we have a good understanding of the objective, let's look at the architecture in depth. For this solution, I have utilized 4 different AWS services: AWS API Gateway, AWS Lambda, DynamoDB, and S3. DynamoDB is used for holding the transactional data, while the S3 is used for storing data other than structured or unstructured. I have implemented 4 Lambda functions. Each Lambda function represents an HTTP method. The create function is used to create a record in DynamoDB. The put method is used to update an existing record in the DynamoDB. The list would retrieve an existing record from the DynamoDB. And finally, the second list method represents retrieving an object from the S3 storage. Each of the Lambda functions are exposed externally via API gateway, and thereby you could call the API gateway and implement the required solution that you need. With this complete design, now you can further build a web API or a mobile API, and you can then call the functionality that you need to build up the complete end-to-end solution. With the design and implementation in place, the final step is to test the application. We will run tests to create a record, to update a record, to list the record, and also finally to list the records in S3. The first query here would actually create the record, and the parameters I give is the name and then email address. In the next test, which is update, I will pass in the same name and the email as in the create. However, I will add a new schema and a new value for it to test whether the update can happen. Once these two in place, the next step is to list the particular user that has been created in the first step, and I do that with the get command. And finally, I will also test whether I'm able to list the objects in the S3 bucket by passing in the parameter, by passing in the bucket name. And with that, we would have completed the complete backend implementation.